Hey guys, I'm Nathan from Arms and Armor. This week, I want to look at the role that screws play in Renaissance swords. Stay tuned. So, screws on sword hilts kind of strike the modern eye very frequently as anachronistic, right? They look very modern on an old piece. But during the Renaissance, screws were actually an important part of the way that some swords were put together. So this is 17th century original rapier in the Oakeshott Institute collection. It's in great shape. You can see here on the top of the guard, top or bottom depending, right near where the blade comes out, there are two screws. And these screws affix these plates that help defend the hand. And really, these are fairly normal looking, slotted screws with a rounded head. If we look inside of here, you guys probably can't really see it, but the back end of the screw protrudes through the guard arms and is peened on the back side, right? So it's essentially, they used a screw to tighten this thing down, and then they riveted the end of the screw to keep it from backing out. Now this was actually a pretty high-tech fix at the time, and it was expensive, right? Today, screws kind of strike us as cheap, like, oh, well, why wasn't that peened or riveted or forge welded? Well, screws were a really elegant solution, and screws had to be hand cut, right? So the threads on the screw, people were hand cutting them into a softer iron or steel with a file. So it was tons of work to use screws to assemble swords. So this is one of the main places we see them on rapiers, affixing plates over, or in some cases under, rings. And it's something that was done frequently, not all the time, but it was certainly a frequent and accepted way to build these Renaissance rapiers. Another example. Here is I believe this is Dutch rapier hilt, cup-hilted rapier. Right? And you can see right in here at the end of the guard arms that the screw on top goes through the arm and then is peened back there, right? So these screws connect the bell of this guard to the cross of it. And they were hand done, right? So they were a high-tech and innovative solution at the time that was totally period. Another example. This is an English broadsword. It's broadsword because it's sharp on the back and the front. Back swords would only be sharp on the front. So the back isn't sharp. That's why they call it a back sword. I know it's confusing. But on this one, you can see that there are screws that attach the guard to the pommel, right? So they've tapped the pommel, which was hard to do, and hand-cut screws that they use to tighten in and hold the guard to the pommel, right? So these are the main ways that we see screws used in Renaissance and early modern swords, right? Especially 17th, 18th century, to affix plates or the guard to the cross, or to affix the guard to the pommel. And especially in broadswords and back swords, there's a lot of this. It was very fashionable to have screws in there. This isn't the first time screws were used, right? So in like 15th century, late 15th century, Gothic armors, Maximilian armors, you often had screws used in the construction of armors too, especially garnitures. So a garniture is a whole set of armor that has a bunch of interchangeable components, right? So you could set it up for fighting on foot or for jousting or whatever, and different parts of the armor would come off. So there were often reinforcing plates that were added to jousting armors that made essentially the left side double thick, and they would screw an extra plate on there to protect you from the lance. And those were also on very high class expensive armors. So these screws are something that was perceived in period as an elegant and high class solution, whereas today they kind of strike us as disturbingly modern, but they're not, right? We have late medieval, Renaissance, early modern examples of their use. And I was just looking at these this morning because I'm currently making a rapier with a plate in it. So I wanted to remind myself exactly how they were made by looking at these originals so I can think it through and not screw the thing up. All right, guys, thank you very much. Take care.